Happy Midwinter's Day. Good Yule, everyone, and Merry Christmas. So let's get right to it. Is Santa Claus a magic mushroom? The answer is yes. Yes, he is, probably. Anyway, I'll get to the exact reason why, probably, in a minute, after putting the Christmas man in more of a sort of pre-Christian pagan context for you all. Firstly, though, on this winter solstice, a bit of a gift for me. I've just reached 100 subscribers on this channel, so if any of you who have subscribed are watching, thank you very much. That means a lot to me, and I will continue making videos. And if you're new to this channel and like a bit of content on folklore and mythology and the old ways and a bit of storytelling, then why not click subscribe, and I will wing those videos directly to your inbox. Now, Father Christmas, Santa Claus, as he's called in the USA, Father Christmas here in Britain, the Yule Man in Scandinavia, lots of different names for this sort of flying red and white sky deity that wings his way across the night sky around this time of year in lots of parts of the world, delivering gifts and generally being a little bit hallucinogenic, in my opinion. Bit of a clue there. First of all, though, maybe a bit of myth busting. Santa Claus, why is he called that in the USA? So you probably know this name comes from Saint Nicholas, who was a sort of 6th century, I think, Greek pope that used to give little gifts to children if they had been naughty or nice, which is where the name comes from. But the mythos of Santa Claus, of Father Christmas, the Christmas man, is much older than the 6th century. So I sometimes think the Scandinavians have got this right because they still call him Yule Man, which means midwinter man, sort of solstice man, which maybe is a bit more apt because it ties into the pagan Germanic festival of Yule, which is a midwinter feast festival. A bit more on that later. Here in Britain, he's called Father Christmas, and he looks kind of like Santa Claus in the USA. But when you look at old images of him, maybe not that old, maybe just 100 or 200 years ago, 300 years ago, he looks a bit more like a pagan. He looks a bit more like the Green Man. The Green Man, who is he's often wearing red and green as well as red and white, which is obviously symbolic of the holly tree, which has very old pagan associations. The Green Man is a figure that appears a lot in British and wider European folklore. He usually stands for the regenerative power of nature, death, and also rebirth. So that's a very important thing for this time of year, and often represented by the holly bush, which, because it's got very red berries, very fiery red berries symbolic of life, and evergreen leaves, it's symbolic of the hope that comes when the nights are getting shorter. I think in the Christian mythos it's repurposed to mean the blood of Christ or some nonsense like that. He feeds into the Christian imagination. There were Christians in the Middle Ages still feverishly carving green men in church doorways. So clearly there, the Green Man is still living in the forests of the mind of these early sort of newly Christian stonemasons living in villages, so still in the popular imagination. There's often 2 green men. There's often an oak king and a holly king. And they're in perpetual battle. It's like a battle between darkness and light. Every solstice, the holly king defeats the oak king and takes his crown, and the power of darkness, of winter, gets stronger and stronger, and the nights get longer and longer until midwinter's night tonight. And then with sunrise tomorrow morning, the Oak King gets one over on the Holly King, takes his crown, and then the days start getting longer and longer until summer solstice, often represented by the oak tree. So the holly and the oak, cosmic enemies, perpetually fighting that battle between light and darkness, which is a very, very old mythic idea. You know, you can trace that right back to the ancient Near and Middle East. This also ties in, of course, with the idea of the wheel of the year. So in the pre-Christian tradition, in Druidry, in Germanic paganism, right back to the henge and megalith builders, there's this idea of the wheel of the year. So you've got the winter solstice, which is today, the summer solstice. You've got the spring and autumn equinox. You've got the cross-quarter days. So we've just had Samhain, Halloween. That's the Day of the Dead, right? So all the dead have been ranging abroad, all the spirits of the ancestors. If you've seen any ghosts in the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, that's probably why. And then all the dead return back into the earth on Midwinter's Day. That's how the mythos sometimes goes in certain pre-Christian and contemporary pagan ideas. So all the stone circles of Northern Europe, particularly in Britain and Ireland, they're aligned to these calendrical points of the year, astronomical points of the year, midpoints and high points. So Stonehenge, it's aligned to sunrise on midsummer solstice and also sunset on midwinter solstice. Newgrange in Ireland, on midwinter's day, midwinter sunrise, a shaft of light goes straight to the back of that chamber. Some say that's symbolic of a sort of male sky god impregnating a female earth god, giving birth to the new year, the sun. So the sun is reborn in Druidry. That's the divine sun child is sometimes called the Mabon. The Mabon is reborn. Obviously, this is going to be screaming Jesus at you, all of this, because the Christians obviously perfectly fitted their Christian mythos onto a pre-existing pagan one, which goes right back through the Druids, all the way back to the megalith builders, 6,000 years ago, who were building these monuments that were clearly designed around these midwinter's days and clearly associated with, in the case of Stonehenge, with the rebirth of the sun, most likely, and also very, very strongly connected with the ancestors, as well as just prosaically being a kind of solar calendar. You need to know when to plant your crops, things like that. But yeah, this idea of the sun coming back, the sun setting over those burial mounds in a lot of those ancient landscapes, that the sun, midwinter's sun, sets over a lot of the old chambered tombs that are still in the landscape. 30 minutes drive in that direction. If you're ever in the West Country, visit Stonehenge. So this idea of the sun being reborn out of the darkness, obviously big Jesus vibes here. And just as a side note, people sometimes say, "Oh, those pesky Christians, they stole Christmas from the pagans." Yeah, I'm sure there was some political skullduggery going on, with the Council of Nicaea and many, many later events. It also might have happened a bit more. It might not have been so top down. It might have just happened a bit more organically, because obviously these cyclical events, our ancestors have been doing this for millennia, so it made sense for the Christians to do that. It might not have been population control, but also there might have been a bit of that as well. Anyway, side issue. This idea of a lot of these old stone circles and this time of year, Samhain going towards winter solstice, being associated with the dead. Another folkloric idea we have at this time of year, which is very common across Northern Europe, particularly in Britain, is this idea of the wild hunt. So at this time of year, there's some sort of god. Sometimes it's Odin or Woden. In Wales, it's Gwyn ap Nudd, who rides out of the Welsh otherworld, Annwn. Sometimes it's Herne the Hunter, who's a slightly more contemporary version of the very, very ancient horned god. Cernunnos, he was called in Gaul, supposedly, but very, very ancient god of the wild hunt. God of the wild, like a version of the Green Man, again, that sort of wild man, god of the wild, also associated with the underworld. So this god, sometimes it's also King Arthur, and the name of this time of year in the Druidic tradition is Alban Arthur, the light of Arthur, or the light of the Great Bear, which is the constellation of the plough, the Big Dipper in the USA. So lots of different folkloric threads, all tying in to this time of year, the death and rebirth of the Son, the birth of the divine child, the Saviour, Jesus Christ, and also this spectral hunt taking place through the sky. Now, obviously, you'll probably be thinking now of Father Christmas, of Santa Claus flying through the sky on midwinter's night, delivering gifts with his reindeer. The imagery is very, very similar. So here we have a link with Santa Claus and Arthur, with the horned god, and with Woden, with Odin, who also used to ride through the sky on Midwinter's night on his wild hunt, on his eight-legged horse, Sleipnir. So this is a very, very, very old idea. It's usually the spirits of the dead going for one last ride about. Sometimes King Arthur's with them before disappearing back into the sort of she mounds, the fairy mounds, the burial mounds. Now this leads me on to magic mushrooms, specifically the Amanita muscara or fly agaric mushroom, used a lot by the Old Norse, often associated with Odin, actually, and the madness that descends in battle and the berserkers, and also Volva and Seidir and the Norse shamanism, swaying shamanism, which is associated with Odin and the taking of those mushrooms, which leads us to the ancient shamanism of Northern Europe, of which the cult of Odin is probably a remnant. That's probably best preserved in the shamans of Siberia, the Sami, the Ket, a lot of these indigenous groups in Western Siberia and also Scandinavia. Where shamanism is very important in a community, going on a soul flight to retrieve information from the ancestors or spirits of the dead and bringing it back. Usually the tool they use for that is the Amanita muscara mushroom, which is a psychedelic I haven't personally had a lot of success with compared to other things of mycological interest. It just makes me very nauseous and makes my legs go wobbly. Possibly because I'm not taking it in the right way, which is you're meant to let your reindeer eat it and then drink the urine, and that filters out all the nauseating toxins. It just gives you the soul flight aspect. But yes, these Siberian shamans today, they can be quite difficult to find, but they often are underneath trees, underneath pine trees. And the shamans would dress as the mushroom. You'll recognize this as an act of sympathetic magic. You know, you dress like the thing to find the thing, to be the thing. So they would wear red and white, sometimes white spots on their red sort of clothing, with hats. Also, of course, these were so precious, these mushrooms, that they would often be given as gifts on the Midwinter Solstice feast day. Sometimes maybe hang them on trees or leave them under trees. Maybe the shamans would come down through the smoke hole if you're snowed in. That's probably a bit of a prosaic explanation. I think the smoke hole probably has more of a symbolic meaning. It's the access to the spirit world, right? So you take these mushrooms and you go on a soul flight. So these shamans are imagined as flying through the sky. This mushroom, by the way, was also possibly one of the ingredients of the medieval witches' flying ointment, which is normally rubbed sort of around their genitals, possibly along with some form of nightshade. We don't really know because it was usually kept secret, but because of the sort of soul flight or flying vision quests that it normally induces, it was probably an element in those witches' brews as well, which again ties us back to the horned god and these sort of Wiccan entities, as well as Odin. So yeah, Siberian sky shaman. That's Santa Claus dressing up as a magic mushroom, also with links to Odin, with the horned god, even with King Arthur, and of course with Jesus Christ himself, the light. Just a final note on that. Another Siberian story, this is from the Sami people, is of Arkanadi, who is the daughter of the sun child. Arkanadi, she's beautiful, she flies in the sky, she wears red and white as well. And she's flying over, and she always wants to go and visit humans because she's interested in them, wants to see what makes them tick. And her father, the sun, is like, oh, no, I don't want you going down there, bad humans. But she persuades her dad, and to cut a long story short, she descends in human form and wakes up and grows very quickly as a human child. And she's loved by her adoptive old parents, and then she brings delight to all the humans on Earth. She teaches them how to make beautiful clothes by stitching red berries and bits of stone and shell to them. And she does very many miraculous things and brings a lot of joy to people. But she also inspires a lot of jealousy because she can be a bit weird. She walks through walls, she can walk over water, stuff like that. Remind you of anyone? And in the end, she's betrayed and killed in a smoky hut. And then her father, the sun, rescues her again through the smoke hole. Yeah, so she dies not so much for our sins, but you can definitely see the same story at play here. This is the thing I love about myth and folklore; just everything links to everything else. So yeah, Akanadi, their daughter of the sun, and Father Christmas and the magic mushroom. Some people think that's also Soma from the Rig Veda, ancient Indo-European religious text. Soma is, if you look at the text, it's clearly associated with the sun, again, Akanidi, but also this some sort of hallucinogen. So yeah, a lot there, but the Christmas man, the Yule Man, strong roots in the pagan tradition, both in Germanic paganism and going right back to the Iron Age Celts, and even further back to the prehistoric age with these feast days happening at the solstices and equinoxes, and right further back into the roots of European shamanism and the use of this psychedelic mushroom used to go on soul flights to contact the dead. So, Merry Christmas, one and all. If you've made it this far, well done, because that was a bit of a burble. So I've got a surprise for you. I'm an artist as well as a storyteller, and I've designed these Christmas cards. They're sort of pagan-themed Christmas cards. So we have a little pagan Santa here, who I call Yule Man, and he has his little reindeer friend called Rudy. Got a dog called Rudy, so named after him. So Yule Man and Rudy. There's a little slightly controversial message on the back there, telling you about the pagan origins of the Christmas man. Yeah, if you're interested in these cards, if you don't live in Southwest Country, where these are in some local shops around here, then you can get them on Redbubble. My Redbubble store is in the description. And some of these are rude, some of them are dark, some of them are just a bit subversive, and some of them are just quite cute. So Yule Man and Rudy Christmas cards here, just in time for Christmas, so you can politely troll all your Christian friends and relatives if you're an atheist or a pagan or a wizard or a Buddhist, I don't know. Anyway, happy Yule, everyone. Merry Christmas. Have a great one. I'll see you in the new year.